PR Connections Radio presents. This podcast is brought to you by LifeWave. Ready to elevate your wellness game? Meet X39 from LifeWave.com. This game-changing patch uses phototherapy to stimulate your skin, enhancing strength and stamina by channeling your body's innate energy. Simply apply it to harness infrared heat, naturally boosting your vitality. Want to learn more? Visit www.lifewave.com/VernD and step into a healthier, more active lifestyle today.
Welcome back to Breaking the Silence, Finding the Courage to Be Heard, where we turn quiet fears into confident voices. Now, to all of my listeners out there, would you agree that growth doesn't always look like becoming louder or even more polished? Or maybe growth is just remembering not to curse out your neighbors when they don't bring in their trash cans. Now, sometimes it just looks like becoming more honest about who you are and letting your voice reflect that. So today's guest, Rebecca, brings a perspective shaped not only by speaking, but also by transformation. Now, she has spent time developing her own voice in structured, very intentional ways, but her journey just hasn't been about perfecting a persona. It's been about just letting go of one. From trying to embody a more intense, high-energy speaking style, she has discovered that humor, relatability, and authenticity are where she feels most at home. So Rebecca will share some personal challenges as well, including navigating a few demons and how she continued to redefine what it means to use her voice, not just on stage, but in her own life. Today, we will be talking about what it means to just keep moving forward with your voice, to allow it to evolve, to soften, and to become more truly yours. So welcome, Rebecca. Tell us a little bit more and let our listeners to get to know more about you.
Thank you so much, Gail. Happy to be here. Well, like Gail has said, my name is Rebecca, and Gail and I met about a year and a half ago through a Toastmasters club called Storytellers that focuses on the art of storytelling. And storytelling has something that I've always been passionate about. I've always been wanting to get into public speaking and really find and grow into my own voice. As my main career, I work in information technology, doing all sorts of technology things, but where my passion truly lies is in public speaking.
Wow, that's great. And when I think about, the fact that what you are involved in right now and what it took for you to get there, as you reflect on that journey from wanting to sound highly intelligent to now focusing on making more of a connection, what stands out to you about how people grow into their voices over time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what stands out to me is that most people don't really grow into a better voice per se, but actually more into just an honest one that's actually true to who they are. And that's my story. When I first started, I really believed that I needed to be taken seriously, that I had to sound intellectual and polished, and like I had everything figured out. I remember giving earlier speeches. I was so focused on using the right words, sounding smart enough, delivering it perfectly. And I wasn't really connecting with people. And people could feel that. I was even told, and I think you were also in this meeting, that quite often the feedback that I would get from my speeches is that I didn't come across as conversational or personable, which at the time I was like, how dare you? I'm going to be the next Tony Robbins. But I realized it's actually very true, because a lot of my speeches felt like a performance and it wasn't connecting with that version of me either. What shifted for me is when I stopped asking, how do I sound impressive? And started asking, does this feel true? And then things started to change.
Oh, interesting. Seems like we may have a technological problem right now. Let's see. While she's figuring it out, I will just continue to discuss just a little bit about what she was talking about. She had mentioned that we had met like over a year ago as part of Toastmasters. And in Toastmasters, after each one of our speeches, we have to give feedback regarding how the voice carries over, whether they felt natural, whether their gestures were, authentic and so forth. So as she had mentioned, she felt a little bit uncomfortable because of the fact that she was coming across more professorial. And so this has been part of Rebecca's journey in terms of becoming more conversational, more humorous. And I'm sure Rebecca is going to talk a little bit about that transformation as we move forward as well. So, oh, she's back. Wonderful. So go ahead. You were talking a little bit about having to not sound so professorial and intellectual and being more natural. I think.
Yes. Yes. So what stands out about me for how people grow into their voice over time is really learning how to stay true to yourself and not really being overly influenced by, oh, I have to sound like Tony Robbins or I have to sound like David Goggins or Brene Brown, but really embracing who you are and staying authentic and true to yourself.
And so the fact that you've mentioned, trying to be more like a Tony Robbins or a David Goggins style speaker earlier on, what do you think helped you let go of that version of who you thought you had to be and then step into that voice that felt more like you? Or here's the second part of this. Did your personification of your dog Fawn have anything to do with that transformation?
Well, that's a good question. Honestly, right when I first came into Toastmasters, I was dead set. I was on this mission of being a speaker exactly like one of those two. But through trial and error, I realized it wasn't really working because I was trying to be very intense, high energy, theatrical. And while I respect that style, it actually didn't quite fit for the type of person I am. I can't influence people by screaming at them about how they need to better their lives or through the more masculine energy and aura. I realized I need to embrace who I am as a person. And so then that's how things started to shift. And then I started to feel more natural. It was when I stopped acting like speaker woman. And then, yes, like you said, I became more laid back. I became more humorous. And also I started paying attention more to how people responded because, again, I wasn't really connecting with people when I was trying really, really hard to sound impressive. I only really connected with them when I was being human. And so that's when I slowly started to let this version go and I stopped forcing it and relaxed. It's interesting you mentioned Fawn. For the viewers who don't know, I'm competing in the Toastmaster humorous speech contest this year. And Fawn, who's my pet Doberman, is a big character in that speech. And that speech is not at all like David Goggins or Tony Robbins. It's just a lot of fun with huge characterization. I do a little woof, I am the police, and like all sorts of characterization for her. And through that speech specifically, I realized, I'm having so much fun giving this speech. The audience can really tell they're also enjoying it because I'm having fun. And so that just makes me want to lean into my authentic voice even more.
Yeah, that is so hilarious. How you mentioned about you needed to become more human in order to feel more authentic, but the irony is you became more dog-like in order to become more human and humorous. So yeah, that was just a fantastic speech, and I see that speech going all the way to the top. That's for sure. So as we move along those same ideas about how we transform our voice, you've talked about the shift from wanting to sound highly intellectual to choosing to speak more simply. What made that shift more challenging? And can you reflect on what you gained from it, or another example about having made that transition?
Yes. So in the beginning, I thought I needed to sound intelligent. And especially as someone working in IT, when I communicate through a lot of technical jargon and stuff, I thought that that was actually what I needed to be in order to reach people. But actually, it turns out that working in IT and then speaking to just the general public and everyone is vastly different. And so what I realized is actually that I tied a bunch of my credibility to sounding intelligent. But through simplifying my message, I felt like I was dumbing myself down. And at first, I absolutely hated that. And Toastmasters taught me that I need to speak so simply with a bunch of clarity. And I was like, well, I want to sound like I'm a professor at Oxford. And that just wouldn't reach people in the same way. I remember one day I was going over my speech with one of my first Toastmaster mentors, and he was like, Rebecca, you need to rewrite your speech using only words an 8th grader understands. I was like, what? Why? I felt insulted. And he's like, do you want to sound intelligent or do you want to be understood? And I realized that he's actually right. If I wanted to reach as many people as possible, I needed to use simpler words. And what I gained through doing this was a lot more connection, because I realized people don't connect to complexity. They connect to clarity. They connect to things that feel relatable and easy to understand. Hey, that's probably the reason why Toastmasters International speeches all have universally applicable themes to every single one of their speeches, so everyone can relate and everyone can understand and get their emotions hooked into the speech. I also realized that if people can't follow what I'm saying, it doesn't matter how intelligent I am. Clarity will reach people, but complexity will just distance them.
Oh, yes, I like. Can you say that again? Say that phrase.
Oh, yeah.
Say it again, because it's so
Clarity.
powerful.
Yeah, clarity will reach people. Complexity will just distance them.
Yep, absolutely. I love that. I love that. And what I have found through Toastmasters as well, we have, and I don't know if it's a unique situation, whereas our Toastmasters club is online, but all of our competitions are in person. So the transition that you make from the online delivery of the speech compared to the in-person delivery is night and day. So you can really experience that relatability when you get in front of a live audience. And sometimes, I don't know if you've experienced this, when you get the live reaction from your audience, it changes your transition to your next point. Because if you don't feed into that relatability, then your next point doesn't necessarily hit like it should, because you don't take into account. So it's a great example of changing your voice based upon how it falls with your audience as well. So important. So I'm going to pivot just a little bit. Your journey, of course, that we've talked about thus far hasn't just been about speaking. It's also including navigating some of your demons, as I referred to earlier, and personal growth. How has finding your voice played a role in how you understand and care for yourself off the stage?
Yeah. Honestly, finding my voice off the stage has probably been even more important than on the stage, because for a long time, I wasn't just learning how to speak, I was trying to figure out how to understand myself. Things like ADHD, my past with addiction, emotional patterns, quitting smoking, losing weight, like all these things, they don't just affect your life, they affect how you communicate with previous friend groups, with current partnerships, and all of these other things. And for a long time, my internal communication, actually just with myself, was not that great. My voice to myself was awful. I would constantly overthink, suppress, avoid, and quite honestly, as I'm sure we've all done, pretend everything is fine. When really it's just a bunch of chaos inside my brain.
That's
right. Oh no, sorry. I realized during that time frame, I didn't actually have a voice of my own yet. I had reactions, coping mechanisms. I had even embraced other people's voices as my own. I had a friend that hated yoga. Therefore, I would tell people I hate yoga, not doing it, when really, I love yoga. So it's just interesting how when there's a lack of clarity and our own self-talk voice inside our head, how easily others can influence us into changing our perceptions and drift away from our true authentic self. And so I had no clarity, but one of the biggest turning points for me was realizing what I thought was what I thought was addiction actually wasn't the disease of addiction, but untreated ADHD. And that's completely how I changed seeing myself, which was a complete shock too. And that was whole rewriting my voice and coming into my authentic self and realizing, oh, I've been embracing these words that other people have said, but it's not actually true to me. So instead of seeing myself as someone who was a part of that group, which helps many people, I started to understand why I personally was still struggling. And that actually gave me something I didn't have before, which was more specific language and words. And because I had more specific words, I could start using my voice differently. And things really started to shift. And then it wasn't just about communicating with my friends or speaking in front of people, but it actually became about being honest in my actual life and having that internal voice be honest with who I am. So that started looking like vocally setting boundaries with people, having uncomfortable conversations, and even separating myself from certain friendships that were no longer in alignment with who I was becoming, which wasn't actually easy. That was actually very hard. But sometimes using your voice doesn't make things necessarily smoother or easier, but it can make things clearer. And I finally felt like I was stepping into an authentic version of me with a voice that was truly my own, which was honestly amazing.
And can you remember the reactions of some of the individuals that may have noticed this transformation, either positive or negative?
Yeah. Well, some people were kind of reacted like, oh, I could have told you that. Like, I already knew. I was kind of letting you figure this out on your own. And then other people understood and it still supported me through the journey. And then others, right, couldn't quite understand, and that's okay too. But I would say even when I had to separate myself from certain people that were no longer in alignment, I would say ultimately that nothing went sour per se. It's just that like you have paths that you're walking, right? And then there's like a fork, and then you just diverge on the path. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you won't ever meet again. But it just means that the one thing that was commonly binding for me in the past, the common thread that was holding a bunch of my past friendships together, was this one thing that I realized was no longer applicable to me. And while that was hard for both of us, we're, still like friends and like each other's photos and stuff like that, because we understand that we're each allowed to have our own unique voice.
Absolutely. And, I have said very often how important it is to know when to pursue and when to pivot. And your analogy about going on that path, and then that path, diverges, like you have to choose on that fork in the road which direction that you need to take. And who knows, those that you had to separate yourself from, or to remove yourself from that particular experience, whether that path is going to go full circle. Maybe those people will come back when they realize, that these paths had to move on in different directions. So yeah, that's truly, truly powerful as well. Just continuing around that same thought. Earlier on, success might have looked like sounding really impressive and really powerful. How do you define success now when it comes to using your voice?
Yes, definitely. Exactly like you said, success used to just look like, do I sound impressive? Do I sound like people would walk over fires and hot coals for me, and for them to change their lives? Because that's, something Tony Robbins does. Did I deliver that well? Should I have worded that sentence differently? But now I've like completely tossed all that out the window and it's so much simpler. It's, do I feel like myself when I'm speaking? Do I enjoy the whole experience? Did the audience have fun? And did the audience hear what I have to say? Because I realize now that success isn't about the performance element or, like fog machines and loud music and being super impressive. I am speaker woman, listen to me. But really just about living in alignment. Because honestly, I wouldn't want to listen to someone either if this woman was like, look at me, I am speaker woman, I have all of this wisdom to bestow. No, I would be like, okay, next. But now, because now I'm speaking in alignment from my spirit, that's how I gauge success. Is this speech given in alignment with who I am? Does the audience have fun? And is the message clear? And if I achieve those things, then I consider myself successful.
Wow. And those three things that you said were absolutely the most important thing in order to really feel successful when you're delivering speeches, when you're talking to your teammates, when you're collaborating with others. And, the second one that you mentioned in terms of, does your audience really enjoy it? Do they resonate with it? Because the further that you get away from I to you, the audience, and how they are feeling about what you're saying, that's really what's going to make a difference. And I found myself in a lot of situations when I'm speaking and I can actually feel myself drifting away because I'm so focused on my message that I have to bring myself back, to either ask a question to draw them in or to focus more on what my objective was in the first place for standing up and speaking in front of an audience. So the audience truly makes almost all the difference in the world as well. So we have been talking a little bit, quite a lot about our experiences together as far as Toastmasters is concerned. And over this last year, I mean, you've just been leapfrogging all the way through and going up in leadership. And so now, as VP of Education, throughout this journey, what helps someone continue using their voice when the excitement wears off and growth becomes subtle? Because we have so many different levels in our club.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, because when the novelty of, oh my gosh, I love public speaking, wears off, a lot of people fall off. And as VPE in the one Toastmasters club and as the vice president of membership in a different club, this is actually where I see retention issues come up in regards to Toastmasters club, because people lose that initial passion and excitement. And it gets a little more subtle with the growth, because people in the beginning will see these vast improvements as their speech structure improves and the confidence leaps. But then it kind of will almost plateau a little bit where the growth becomes more subtle. And then people have to focus on more nuanced techniques, like different kinds of vocal techniques and gestures. And the growth for that isn't as visible, so it's often not as exciting. But what I feel helps people is by shifting their focus from the results, which might not be as extreme, but more to identity. Instead of asking, why am I not improving more quickly? Why am I not seeing these results? Am I improving fast enough? I need to do more. Can ask something like, am I someone who shows up and consistently uses my voice to get that practice to improve? Am I making progress towards who I want to be and my longer term goals? Because consistency, unfortunately, it'd be so easy if it was, is not built on motivation. And it's actually built on deciding who you want to be and then kind of just sticking the course. But there is great satisfaction in staying the course and continuing to help reach the goal and who you want to become. So what I've seen helps people to continue to use their voice is kind of that shift from realizing they won't see extreme changes in growth, but that they're still making progress and it will still help them achieve their dreams.
Yep, I love that. And I love the fact that, throughout this journey, so to speak, and even when you are delivering speeches, what I'm getting is that you continue to ask yourself questions about who you want to be during the experience and who you want to be after that experience is over. What have you learned from this as well? And so I should hope that as I continue to listen to this episode, that I'm going to write some of those down, because those questions are just super powerful to continue to ask yourself for every experience. So I just learned so much, from you and others that I bring on, to talk about their speaking journey as well. So continuing on, here's a question for you. If fear itself could send you a performance review from earlier in your journey, what do you think it would say about how you were trying to use your voice back then? Now, this is from fear.
Rebecca, you sound like a TED Talk you just watched 3 hours ago, sprinkled in with the Tony Robbins wannabe. You're trying too hard. And trust me, we can tell. But I will say this, it takes great courage to get in front of people and speak. Also, kind of sad, because I was a bigger, larger part of your life in the beginning. Now I feel like you're kind of breaking up with me. But I reluctantly will admit, I'm happy you faced me and grew through it. You've learned how to use me as a tool. And for that, 8 out of 10.
I love it. I love it. You need to deliver that. That is so awesome. I love that. Wow. One of the things, and I know we're getting to be close to time, was that you and I had the same mentors as we joined. And one of the things that I found helpful, and for any of our listeners out there, whenever you embark upon a new situation, if you find yourself a mentor, whether you're assigned one or not, find yourself a mentor, because that mentor always challenges you to stretch yourself and to be different or to improve upon where you started out. So if you had to give some advice to our listeners as well, do you have one final word of advice?
Yes. With the theme of today, your voice is allowed to change. And a lot of people think that they need to have it figured out before they start, myself included. Like, this is who I am, this is how I sound, this is who I need to be. But through experience, in my experience, it's not actually quite how that works. So for someone who's still trying to figure out what their voice looks like, what I would want them to remember as they continue moving forward is that you discover your voice by using, refining, and outgrowing versions of it. Your voice is allowed to change. And if you're still figuring it out, you're actually not behind, but in the middle of the process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rebecca. It is a continuing journey. You're never at the end. You're always someplace in the middle. That's for sure. So, Rebecca, you are actually the final episode for Breaking the Silence. And it's not the final episode because I'm moving into season 2. So as we close out this season, if there's one thing to carry with you, it's this: your voice is not something to perfect. It's something that you practice, just like Rebecca said, and allow to evolve. So we will explore this further in our next season, which will have the tagline Beyond the Boundaries, tackling topics that up until now felt too fearful to face. So this has been Breaking the Silence, finding the courage to be heard, and wherever your voice takes you next, may you continue to grow into it. Until next season.
This podcast is brought to you by LifeWave. Ready to elevate your wellness game? Meet X39 from LifeWave.com. This game-changing patch uses phototherapy to stimulate your skin, enhancing strength and stamina by channeling your body's innate energy. Simply apply it to harness infrared heat, naturally boosting your vitality. Want to learn more? Visit www.lifewave.com/VernD and step into a healthier, more active lifestyle today. PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.